What is the definition of liminality? Liminality is the transitional state of being in between, where an individual or group is no longer in their previous condition, but has not yet entered a new one. It is often associated with ambiguity, transformation, and the potential for change. It's an interesting word. Ever since I was a young lad, I've found myself drawn to strange and unremarkable places in video games. Not necessarily the places you're supposed to remember, not grand cities, battlefields, dungeons, or whatever landmark the game wants you to stop and look at. I'm talking about the places that exist somewhere between all of that. A hallway that doesn't seem to lead anywhere important, a room that seems to be tucked away behind something you weren't really meant to notice, a building that exists but doesn't seem to have anything inside of it. Places the game doesn't really ask you to visit, and that's what has always interested me about them, because sometimes when you step somewhere like that, nothing happens, and somehow that's what makes it interesting. There isn't necessarily a secret waiting for you. There isn't always an enemy, an item, or some hidden piece of lore tucked away in the corner. Sometimes it's just there. A space that exists because for one reason or another, somebody had to make it. And when you're finding yourself standing there, away from whatever it is the game actually wants you to be doing, there's a strange feeling that begins to settle in. You aren't lost. You're just somewhere you probably weren't supposed to be, and for that moment, the game feels a little different. My name is Mr. Odd, and welcome to the channel. Here, we look at the places that go unnoticed, the places you aren't meant to be, the places you have no real reason to. Sometimes they're hidden away behind a door you'll probably never open. Sometimes they're just sitting outside the path you're expected to take, and sometimes they're not hidden at all. They're simply somewhere you would never think to look. They're the parts of games that exist quietly in the background, usually without asking anything of you, and that's where we're going to look. Today, we shall be looking at a few odd places and spaces in Red Faction Guerrilla. For this video, we'll be using the remastered edition of the game. Originally released in 2009, Red Faction Guerrilla was developed by Volition and published by THQ. It was the third main entry in the Red Faction series, moving away from the first-person perspective of its predecessors and putting us onto the surface of Mars as Alec Mason, a miner who becomes involved with the Red Faction rebellion against the Earth Defense Force. The original version was released on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 on June 2nd, 2009, with the PC version later following that year on September 15th. Nearly a decade later, Red Faction Guerrilla would receive a remaster. Red Faction Guerrilla Remastered released on July 3rd, 2018 for PC, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. It brought the game back with upgraded visuals and support for higher resolutions, while keeping the same world, the same destruction, and perhaps the most importantly for us, the same strange little corners of Mars. And it's those corners we're interested in. Because Guerrilla is a particularly interesting game to look at through this lens, it's an open world built around destruction. Buildings can come down, roads can be crossed, and entire sections of Mars can be explored. But when you start moving away from the things you're actually supposed to be doing, you begin to find places that feel different. Some not necessarily hidden, and some not even secret. They are just there. And today, we're going to take a look at a few of them. We begin our journey in the Parker sector of Mars. This is where the beginning stages of the game take place, and for the most part, Parker is exactly what you'd expect from Guerrilla. Mining settlements, EDF installations, scattered buildings, roads, and plenty of places for Alec to cause a considerable amount of property damage. But tucked away behind one of the nearby EDF facilities is this little nook. As you can see, there's an ascending ramp built into the terrain, leading upward and to nowhere in particular. There's no entrance waiting for us at the top, no objective sends us here, no collectible gives us a reason to climb it. There's not even anything particularly interesting waiting at the other side. It's simply a ramp, and that's what makes it so odd. It was constructed as part of this environment, given a shape, a purpose, and enough space for the player to walk up it. Yet from the player's perspective, it accomplishes very little. You walk up, look around, and that's it. The view isn't even particularly remarkable. There's no great secret hidden above the facility, no shortcut into somewhere else, and nothing that changes by being up here. Once you've reached the top, you've essentially reached the end of the road, and yet the space exists. It's a small thing, almost insignificant when compared to everything else happening around it. Most players could spend their entire time in Parker without ever noticing it, and even if they did, there's very little reason to stop and investigate. But that's exactly the kind of place we're looking for. It's not a secret area, nor an Easter egg. It's just a piece of the world, sitting quietly, where nobody needs to go. Sitting out here by itself is a lonely beacon. There's no obvious reason for it to be here, and just beyond it appears to be another stretch of terrain that at first glance looks perfectly accessible. You'd think you could walk simply forward and see where it leads, but you can't. There's an invisible wall positioned near the beacon, stopping you from going any further, and that raises a rather simple question. Why put a beacon here, out in the middle of nowhere, only to surround the area with a boundary the player can't cross? Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's simply left over from development, or a piece of the world that was never meant to be explored. But standing here with nothing around you but the rocks, the beacon, and a boundary you can't see, it's difficult not to wonder what the purpose was supposed to be on the other side. Perhaps there's nothing there at all, and somehow that's almost more interesting. A few hundred meters away, there's another little section that caught my attention. The final mission of the Parker sector takes place around here. Using an armored truck, you're tasked with destroying a series of EDF sensor towers, clearing the way for the Red faction to push further into Mars and into the next sector, Dust. During the mission, this place has a very obvious purpose. There are targets to destroy, enemies to deal with, and a reason for you to be here, but come back later after the mission is over and that purpose is gone. The towers are gone, the fighting is gone, and there is nothing left to accomplish. What's left is simply the landscape, and there's something strangely uncomfortable about returning to a place after its purpose has disappeared. You're surrounded by these jagged formations of rock, stretching up from the ground like teeth. They make the area feel almost claustrophobic, despite how open it actually is. It's a reminder that this place isn't exactly a welcoming place. This is Mars, after all, and even the landscape seems to have something against you, and it's quiet here. Perhaps a little too quiet. We now find ourselves in the next sector of the game, Dust. As the name might suggest, Dust is a harsher part of Mars. The EDF presence here is considerably heavier, and there is certainly no shortage of things for the Red faction to blow up, but our goal isn't to do any of that. Not far from one of the safe houses sits a small crater, tucked away from the roads and everything else happening around it. There's nothing here, no mission, objective, or a collectible, no particular reason for the player to stop. It's a small piece of scenery, and yet there's something about it that bothers me. Maybe it's the crater itself, maybe it's the way the surrounding landscape seems to go away once you are inside the crater, or perhaps it's the gray skies that hang over everything, giving the entire area a strangely muted feeling. It's only a small spot in Dust, and realistically there's nothing worth here, but for whatever reason, I found myself stopping to look at it. And sometimes that's enough. This next little section of Dust is somewhat interesting. There's really nothing here. It's simply a passageway between two areas, giving the player a shortcut from one part of the sector to another between missions. It's functional, but only just. You pass through, continue on your way, and eventually you forget it was ever there. There aren't any collectibles hidden away here, no enemies waiting around the corner, no mission takes place here, and there's nothing particularly remarkable about the landscape, just rocks and silence. It's one of those places that feels strangely disconnected from everything around it. You're still technically moving through the game world, but for a brief moment, there really isn't anything asking for your attention, so you continue. And the longer you stay, the quieter it seems to become. There's something oddly contemplative about that. Perhaps it's the emptiness or the complete lack of anything happening around you. Maybe it's simply the realization that you're standing in a space that was built to be passed through rather than experienced. You're not really supposed to stop here, but if you do, there is a faint sense of eeriness to it. and nothing happens. And yet, for a moment, it feels like something should be. I found this very small overlook tucked above one of the nearby roads. There's absolutely nothing up here. No collectibles or enemies, and as far as I can tell, no mission or event ever makes use of this particular spot. It simply sits above the road, looking down over everything below. From here you can watch the occasional vehicle pass through the landscape, but otherwise there's very little happening. It's almost easy to miss, and I think that's what makes it interesting. This little overlook doesn't really serve a purpose beyond being part of the terrain. It feels less like a location and more like a leftover thought, a tiny piece of the world that exists because the terrain needed to continue this way. And here we reach our final stop in this little journey, yet another quiet section of dust. There's really only one thing of note here, a destroyed vehicle sitting out in the open, which you can break down for a little extra salvage. Beyond that, there's a surprising amount of space. It looks like it might have been intended as another shortcut between areas, but honestly, I haven't found much reason to use it. There's no objective leading you here, nothing particularly important to discover, and no reason to stop, and yet I kept looking around. Over the small rocky hills, you can just make out a lonely wind turbine in the distance. It's a small detail, but one I found myself thinking about, because the more you wander around places like this, the more you start to notice the strange relationship Guerrilla has with its setting. This is Mars, a planet that, in reality, is incredibly hostile to human life. There's no natural environment here waiting for us. Everything that exists has been brought here, built here, or constructed because somebody needed it. And then you come across a place like this, a wide, empty stretch of rock, a destroyed vehicle left behind, a single wind turbine turning. It's not necessarily eerie because something is happening. It's eerie because nothing is. And I think that's what made this particular spot worth including. So that's where we're going to end our little journey through Red Faction Guerrilla. Thank you for joining me for this first video. I still have a lot to learn when it comes to editing, writing, and honestly, a lot of other things that go into making these videos, but I wanted to start somewhere. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with a friend. It would mean a lot to me, and I'd love to hear from you as well. What was your favorite memory of this old game? Maybe it was one of the big moments. Maybe it was something you found while wandering around, or maybe, like me, it was some completely insignificant little corner of the map that you happened to stumble across. Tell me down below. I genuinely love to see what you guys have to share, and if there's any other games you want to see me cover, or places to explore, please let me know. And until next time, this is Mr. Odd. Don't get lost, or you might just find yourself in a place you can't ever escape from.